How do you convince someone to give up their own life to work for you, for free? If you've never thought about that question, congratulations, you're a normal person with no intention of taking advantage of others. At some point in our lives, many of us who were Jehovah's Witnesses ended up working for Watchtower without pay. But in this video, we're going to analyze how they don't just convince people to work a few hours a month, but even how they convince them to give up their entire lives to serve them full time. In this video, we'll look specifically at 3 strategies they use to achieve this goal, so stay until the end, because you're going to want to understand all 3. The 3 strategies we're talking about were presented by Mark Scott, a helper to the Personnel Committee, in a video that was very recently posted on jw.org, the official website of Jehovah's Witnesses. The video is titled, Pursue Goals That Honor Jehovah. Let's listen to Mr. Scott.
The Watchtower article upon which our comments are drawn focuses on the value of setting goals and also the satisfaction that comes from reaching those goals.
In case you've never been one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you probably don't know what kind of goals Mr. Scott is referring to. And no, we're not talking about goals like getting a degree or excelling in your career. He's talking about a very different kind of goals. From the moment you start studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, much like in any corporation, they begin to set a series of goals for you. The first goal they'll set is for you to become a salesperson. Sorry, no, my mistake, an unbaptized publisher.
Can I go out in service now?
Yes, looks like you are ready.
Once you become an unbaptized publisher, you'll be encouraged to reach the goal of baptism. And once you're baptized, you'll be encouraged to become an auxiliary pioneer. An auxiliary pioneer is someone who commits to preaching for 15 to 30 hours per month. This is a commitment you can take on for 1, 2, or 3 months. But someone can also set the goal of becoming a regular pioneer. A regular pioneer dedicates 50 hours a month to preaching, and not just for 1, 2, or 3 months, but as an ongoing, permanent commitment. Obviously, you won't be able to do this if you have a typical full-time job. You'll need to have a part-time job so that the other half of your time is spent working for the Watchtower, preaching for free.
And we have one more announcement. Sister Lydia Diaz is now serving as a regular pioneer. We're so happy for you. We know you'll have many spiritual adventures ahead of you. Adventures ahead of you.
If you're a man, there are also other goals you can aim for, such as becoming a ministerial servant or an elder. Young people, in particular, both men and women, can set goals like becoming Bethelites or construction servants. A Bethelite is someone who works full-time at one of the branches of Watchtower, whether in offices, printing facilities, or video production. A construction servant is someone who works full-time on a Watchtower construction project, which could be a kingdom hall, an assembly hall, or a branch facility, and so on. Both Bethelites and construction servants are required to move to where the work is, and since they obviously can't work independently anymore, Watchtower covers their basic needs. Essentially, food and housing are provided, and they also receive a small monthly allowance for personal expenses, around $150 a month, which mainly covers transportation, simple clothing, and similar necessities. Now let's listen to Mr. Scott again. And as you do, try to identify the first strategy this leader uses to encourage people to dedicate more of their time working for Watchtower.
Well, in the matter of setting goals, we're really following Jehovah's example, because in Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 11, there's reference there to the eternal purpose that Jehovah formed in connection with the Christ. And again, our study note tells us that in this context, the term purpose refers to a specific goal or aim. In this case, Jehovah's determination that his purpose toward mankind and the earth be fulfilled despite the rebellion.
Did you notice it? The first thing Mr. Scott does here is force the scriptures to make them seem like they support his sales pitch. But in doing so, he doesn't realize the theological consequences this brings. Because if you think about it, when Mr. Scott says that Jehovah sets goals, that's equivalent to saying that when Christ died for humanity, Jehovah was accomplishing one of his goals. That ends up trivializing the very beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses. Of course, the message Mr. Scott is trying to convey is this: if God sets goals, then you should set goals too. However, in doing so, he ends up trivializing the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses. So the first strategy is to force the scriptures to support his sales pitch. Now let's move on to the second manipulation strategy.
Maybe it was encouragement from the faithful and discreet slave. This 4-page insert was found in the June 1979 Our Kingdom Service. It's entitled, "Young Men, Can You Accept This Special Privilege of Service?" That's why I made the goal of Bethel service. Or perhaps it was a talk at one of our regional conventions. Maybe you were in the audience when a very frank but thought-provoking question was posed. Can you explain in prayer to Jehovah why you are not in full-time service?
That's right. Just as Mr. Scott himself admits, the organization runs recruitment campaigns to bring in new full-time workers through articles in their magazines and segments at their conventions. These usually include personal experiences and questions designed to stir the emotions of the audience. In my particular case, I can tell you that it's been over 20 years since I last attended a convention of Jehovah's Witnesses. But what Mr. Scott says here confirms that their recruitment techniques haven't changed. I assume that's because they're still effective. I'm referring to that classic talk given at nearly every convention, where interviews or emotional experiences are used to appeal to the listener's feelings. But in this part of his sales pitch, Mr. Scott reveals something even more when he repeats a question that is commonly asked in those convention talks. The question is,
can you explain in prayer to Jehovah why you are not in full-time service?
Let's think about it. First of all, the term pioneer does not appear in the Bible. And the question itself implies that what Jehovah expects from you is that you become a pioneer. So if that's what Jehovah expects from you, then you have to justify yourself to him for not being one. But if what you're thinking about is pursuing a career, studying something you actually enjoy, then obviously that won't serve as an excuse before Jehovah for not becoming a pioneer. The average Jehovah's Witness won't stop to think that this scenario is unrealistic, or that the term pioneer doesn't even appear in the Bible. The question itself is reductive and highly manipulative. It implies that the only way to please Jehovah is by becoming a pioneer. Let's not forget that within the Watchtower, this concept, common in other churches, doesn't really exist. The idea that you can glorify God through whatever talents you have. In other words, if you're a marine biologist, a profession that has no real use for the Watchtower, then according to that framework, you wouldn't be able to glorify God through your studies. And if you decide to become a microbiologist, well, that wouldn't count either, at least not in terms of using your talents to glorify God. From the perspective of Jehovah's Witness leadership, the only way to glorify God is by using your talents as a full-time salesperson, that is, as a pioneer, a Bethelite, or a construction servant. Every year, hundreds of young people give in to this kind of manipulation and to the guilt generated by these types of talks and questions and end up entering full-time service. But now let's pay attention to the next part, and as we do, try to identify the third technique Mr. Scott uses in his sales pitch.
Of course, we can do our part to encourage others to do the same. We never want to underestimate the very powerful effect of a simple question. What are you planning to do after you get out of school? After you retire? We're really asking, what is your goal?
These words may sound completely harmless. Encourage others to set goals. Ask them what they plan to do when they finish their studies or when they retire. Now imagine a young person answering, "Well, I plan to pursue advanced studies in genetic engineering," or someone about to retire saying, "What I plan to do is take care of my garden and practice Japanese-style woodworking as a hobby." Can you imagine the reaction of the Jehovah's Witness who asked the question? Obviously, that's not what they want to hear, and it's unlikely anyone would actually respond that way. In reality, by encouraging Jehovah's Witnesses to ask these kinds of questions to those finishing their studies or approaching retirement, what Mr. Scott is really doing is creating an environment of social pressure within each congregation, one that, combined with feelings of guilt, pushes more and more members to give the organization more of their time and energy. So, to summarize and answer the initial question, how do the leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses convince someone to give up their own life to work for the organization for free? They do it in 3 ways. First, by forcing biblical verses to make it seem like they support their point. Second, by running recruitment campaigns through their magazines and convention talks, often using emotionally powerful elements and even guilt. Third, by fostering an environment of social pressure in each congregation. Would you like to learn about the true history of Jehovah's Witnesses? Click on the next playlist. And below, I've left you a specially selected video just for you. See you there.